Okay, so now we are familiar with how Statistics Canada, roughly, in a general way, we know how they calculate the consumer price index, which is sort of our benchmark of prices over time. That basket of goods for the household, how much does it cost over time? And we watch that index, and then the movements of that index are then our inflation rate. So the phenomenon of inflation is the increase in the prices measured by the CPI. So, you want to be able to look back at, when your grandpa says, oh, well, back in my day, we could go to a movie for a quarter. Okay, well, you want to be able to put that in context because you know that that quarter for him was was a percentage of their income. Their incomes were proportionately lower. So what was that relative to their purchasing power? So we want to get more of an idea of what purchasing power is, and to be able to compare things over time. So there's a calculation done in here where we take, the example given here is for a salary, but we could do the same thing for prices, right? So whatever the value is in, we're looking to value something in today's dollars. So that quarter that your grandpa paid to go to the movies in 1947, we're going to work our CPI back to see what that value would be. Now, usually going backwards from the base year, it's going to be less than 100. So the base year is always at 100 because those are the prices we're using going forward. But if you were to go in history backward, the trend has always been that prices rise. So as we go backwards, they're gonna go lower. So in 1947 or whenever that was, 1955, your grandpa's quarter, we put that in there, but we also adjust for how things have changed over that time. So in order to find out what the equivalent value is in today's dollars, we can use our CPI as a tool. So we can compare it by using this ratio of the CPI today over the CPI in the originating year. In this case, your grandpa's, 1947. What was the CPI in that year? So we've got, you're going to have something more than one because the prices have continued to rise. So let's say it's 120 now and it's like 65 going back to 1947. It's always got to be less than 100. And then we're going to take that apportion and apply it to whatever that price was. Your grandpa says it was a quarter. Okay, well, what would that mean in today's dollars? Absent of the price increase, what would be the equivalent purchasing power to your grandpa's quarter today? What would that translate into today? What would we need if prices remain constant? What would the same purchasing power be today? So maybe it's $8 is the same as the 25 cents that he had at that time. And that makes sense because we're evaluating it in relation to the economy around us, right? Like that price at that time, a quarter was a lot more valuable at that time. You could get a lot more for a quarter. And that's an extreme example. There are more moderate examples over time. So we can compare things like, what it does here. It says, somebody in 1993 made $30,000. We want to know what that would be in today's dollars. So if we want to look at that person in whatever profession it is, I think they use a teacher. So that teacher was making $30,000 in 1993. But what does that mean in today's dollars? So we divide our CPI in 2021 by the CPI in 1993 to get that relationship, and then we multiply it by your 30,000. So that's how to adjust for price levels. And then a similar thing with the calculation of hourly wages. So, you can do that with hourly wages, you can do it with salaries, you can do it with prices. But we compare that power of the dollar by that ratio of the CPI. Then the next thing is we talk about the nominal interest rate and the real interest rate. So we're talking about how, if I loan you $100 and I charge you 5% on that, well, okay, you're going to pay me $105 at the end of a year. But we know, because the price levels go up, we know that $5 that you're going to give me in 1 year does not have the same purchasing power, because of inflation, does not have the same purchasing power as the $5 would have had today. So what the chapter suggests we do is we consider a real versus a nominal interest rate. So whatever the interest rate is, basically in this case we're just subtracting the inflation rate. So we're saying that, if the inflation rate had been 2% during that time, and you pay me back the $5 1 year later, but the inflation was 2%, then really I've only made 3% on the original $100. I've made 5% less the decreased purchasing power of the 5%. So we say that the real interest rate was 3%. That's where there's a little bit of an advantage to a borrower. There aren't that many advantages to being a borrower, and really lenders in this day and age really do everything that they can in order to make sure that the advantages come to them, because they have obligations to shareholders and everything is about profit. But in a sense, borrowers obtain some advantage by paying back debts with dollars that are less valuable at the time that they pay them back. As I said, amortization and interest renewals and all kinds of things are built in order to, restack the deck against you. But I guess that's one way in which we get ahead in inflation, in some sort of a twisted way. But everything costs more. Your dollar is worth less. You are, as prices increase, you are losing purchasing power. And that's the main message you want to get out of the study of inflation is how do we lose purchasing power, particularly if our wages are remaining at the same and the prices are going up. Well, then that $100,000 you were paying me last year is worth less this year. So that's where you'll hear about things like, going back to the labor unions, very often something that they'll want is for their wages to be indexed to inflation. In other words, at the very least, you should be paying me in dollars that are worth the same every year. So, if you're paying me $100,000 this year, and then the prices go up by 2%, you should index that and make sure you pay me 2% more in order to compensate for the rise in prices, so that I'm actually at least making the same salary as I made last year. The minimum wage is no longer indexed to inflation, and a lot of people's wages these days are not indexed to inflation. In my experience in business, this is just anecdotal evidence from my perspective, but I did find that convincing an employer to index your wages to inflation is often not very easy. I mean, I have been met with the response, well, inflation isn't my fault, so why should I have to compensate you for it? Like, we're literally, I have heard that before from employers. So it is always the employer's call. So once again, we've got this top-down system where the people who generate profit within enterprise are not empowered to decide how the profit is distributed, and therefore, for a long time, wages, some are, but the widespread indexing of wages, transfer payment, fixed incomes, and other things to the inflation rate have long gone out the door. I mean, and look, lately we've been experiencing inflation at a quicker rate. That's been all over the news. That's quite well known. But have we seen that push in wages at the same time? For a while, there was a talk about a labor shortage and how the market might shift, but really, for the most part, we don't see a lot of advancement in wages. So that's why it's so important to measure inflation. And, certainly we talk about it in relation to interest rates, nominal and the real interest rate. All it is simple math. Just take the nominal rate, subtract the rate of inflation, and you get the real rate. That's, for our purposes, that's all we're doing. Then look at the other problem on how to adjust for inflation. And that's really going to be useful to you in your life, because it is worth being able to evaluate, an expense at this time versus at this time. What, did we really come out ahead, or has the price increase been ahead of what it should have been, right? Is our purchasing power slipping? And I think you'd be able to evaluate that given the tools that are here for us.